The Greenbrier Ghost case is considered one of the most unusual murder trials in American history. In 1897, the mysterious death of Zona Heaster Shue rocked the small town of Lewisburg in Greenbriar County, West Virginia. Shortly after her death, Zona's mother claimed to have been visited in the middle of the night by her daughter's ghost, who was claiming to know the identity of her killer. The trial and conviction that followed would go down in history as the first and only murder trial that hinged on the legal testimony of a ghost. In the fall of 1896, Zona Heaster, a 23-year-old woman from Lewisburg, West Virginia, was out running errands when she crossed paths with a tall, handsome man named Erasmus Shue. He was a 37-year-old blacksmith who had just arrived in town, and he went by the nickname Trout. He worked at a blacksmith shop located at the far end of town. And despite the age gap, the two hit it off immediately. They fell madly in love, and they would actually get married only weeks later. Zona's mother, Mary Jane Heaster, not happy about this. She did not approve of this marriage, and she was very vocal about not wanting it to happen. The couple, after they got married, immediately moved into a house on the edge of town, not too far from the blacksmith shop where Trout worked. And by all accounts, they were a loving and happy couple. At one point, about a month or so into the marriage, Zona had become ill, and she was not feeling well. And Trout was Johnny on the spot. He was there with whatever she needed. He even called the town doctor, Dr. Knapp, right away and had him come check on her to make sure everything was fine. So, A+ attentive husband. A couple months later in January, Trout was hard at work, another long day of blacksmithing, and he was worried about his wife. She hadn't been feeling well for a couple days, and she was really in rough shape when he left that morning, and he just wanted to make sure that everything was fine and that she had everything that she needed. So he hires a local boy named Andy Jones to go over to the house and to ask Zona what errands she needs done, if there's any chores she needs done, or if she has any odd jobs around the house that she needs help with. So Andy goes over to the house and he knocks on the door, but there's no answer. But he knows that she's not feeling well, so he cautiously pushes the door open and, he calls out, "Hello, Mrs. Shue," but he doesn't get an answer. Andy would testify later in court that he immediately knew that something was wrong. And here's a quote from Andy's testimony. "Once more, I knocked on the door, and getting no answer, I walked in. I stumbled over Mrs. Shue's body. There she was, stretched out on the floor, looking right up at me with wide open eyes. It seemed like she was laughing. I was frightened, but still able to reach down and shake her. She was stiff and cold. Running from the house, I called across the field to Aunt Martha, 'Mrs. Shue is dead.'" So Andy takes off running, and he makes a beeline for the blacksmith shop to tell Trout that Zona is dead. And then Trout sends Andy to go get the town doctor, Dr. Knapp, while he rushes to the house. And that's when Trout's behavior goes from doting, loving husband to just really strange. When Andy and Dr. Knapp get to the house, Trout has moved Zona's body from the foot of the stairs up to the upstairs bedroom and changed her clothes into her burial dress, which had a really high, stiff collar and just a long flowing dress. And Trout was weeping hysterically, and he wouldn't even let Dr. Knapp thoroughly examine Zona. So Dr. Knapp is trying to determine the cause of death, but around this huge weeping man who was just cradling Zona's upper body in his arms. So Dr. Knapp finally just kind of gives up and just isn't going to try to examine her anymore around Trout. So he basically just says, well, probably natural causes, more than likely a heart attack. Mary Jane, Zona's mom, was not buying that answer at all. She did not believe for 1 second that her daughter died of natural causes. And when they had the visitation where they had the open casket for viewing, Trout was again right there, standing vigilant at the head of her casket. He placed a sheet on the side of Zona's head to kind of prop it up a little bit, and then put a scarf around her neck, which already had this stiff high collar on it anyway, so now she just had this bulky bunch of fabric around her neck. And at Zona's actual funeral, again, Trout was being super weird. Not only did he dress her, he watched over her body 24/7. And he even assisted in prepping the body for burial and actually placing his dead wife's casket in the ground. So no one does that, especially not back then. So they have the funeral, the casket is buried, and it was a very tragic death, but now it's time to mourn and move on. But not for Zona's mother, Mary Jane. She was livid pissed. She did not believe for 1 second that her daughter had died of natural causes, and she did not buy Trout's over-the-top emotions at all. So Zona's mother was very worked up over this, and she would say over and over and over again to herself and out loud to other people, "Zona, please tell me what happened. Who did this to you?" She was just begging her deceased daughter for some kind of a sign. And a few days after the funeral, she got a sign. Mary Jane claims that her daughter Zona's spirit visited her at night in her room. The first night, Mary Jane claimed that her daughter's spirit appeared to her and tried to speak, but nothing came out, and then she just disappeared. The next night, though, Zona's spirit came back and then told her mother that she did not die of natural causes and that Trout had actually killed her. It took a couple more visits. I think there were a total of 4 visits, but Zona managed to get the whole story out of what actually happened. She talked about how her marriage was not sunshine and rainbows as it appeared, and that Trout was very abusive, and he had actually been married 2 times before, and both of his previous wives had died under mysterious circumstances. She then told her mother that Trout had killed her by breaking her neck. Armed with this new information, Mary Jane grabs her brother-in-law and they head down to the prosecutor's office to lay it all out. And she must have been pretty convincing because the prosecutor called up Dr. Knapp and was like, well, her mom is saying that her neck was broken. So you examined the body, right? Was there any evidence of a broken neck? And Dr. Knapp was like, well, actually, I didn't get to do a full examination because Trout was really emotional and he was kind of in my way and wouldn't let me get anywhere near her head and neck. So actually, I don't know if her neck was broken. And this gave them exactly what they needed to be able to exhume Zona's body. And Dr. Knapp ended up doing another examination. And he did indeed find that Zona's neck had been broken. So Trout was arrested for killing his wife and then went to trial. And during the court hearing, it was actually the defense attorneys for Trout who called Zona's mother to the stand and asked her to tell them what Zona's spirit had said to her. They thought that this would discredit her and that everyone would think it was ridiculous, and then the trial would be over. So during the trial, Mary Jane testified that Zona's spirit had told her, this is from the court transcripts, so this is a quote from the transcripts, "He came to me that night from the shop and seemed angry. I told him supper was ready, and he began to chide me because I hadn't prepared any meat. I replied that there was plenty of bread, butter, applesauce, preserves, and other things, that it made a good supper. But he flew into a rage, got up, and came towards me. When I raised up, he seized each side of my head with his hands, and with a sudden wrench, dislocated my neck." Zona's mother then went on to explain that Zona told her other details of the home and the surrounding area, and these were all things that Mary Jane would not have been privy to or would not have known at that time about the area and about their home. She also told them that Zona had told her Trout was very abusive and had been married 2 times before, and both of his previous wives had died under mysterious circumstances. The jury took this information, went back to deliberate. It only took them 1 hour, and they came back to find Trout guilty of first-degree murder, and he was sentenced to life in prison, where he died 8 years later. So what do you think? Do you think Zona's spirit actually came back to tell her mom who killed her?